You can. So Chris Charlesworth grew up in Kelowna in British Columbia's Okanagan Valley, where he had early access to nature near his house, and he sort of fell in love with bird watching. He's been birding in BC for 30 years. He's been a professional bird guide for over 20 years. He's worked for us for a short while, but he's got extensive bird guiding experience throughout North America, where he's led over 50 birding tours in British Columbia, over 100 birding tours in Canada, plus 100 birding tours in the US of A for a number of UK-based and Canadian companies. And we're glad he's starting to work for us. Chris also volunteers his time as an eBird reviewer for large swaths of British Columbia. He has been organizing Christmas bird counts since he was a teenager and still compiles two. He has also served on the BC Rare Birds Committee, a truly thankless job. And he is also the regional editor of British Columbia for the North American Birds magazine. Clients always comment on Chris's excellent field skills. Everybody likes his kind of laid back style. I have to say, in working with Chris, I enjoy his laid back style because I'm the opposite of that. And Chris thoroughly enjoys showing people birds and making sure his clients get good views of any species seen, especially life birds. I mean, does the guide like anything more than showing a person a life bird, Chris?
I think that's what it's all about right there.
Yeah, no, it's pretty fun. I love that enthusiasm. I got nothing more, Chris. I'm gonna mute up myself and the floor is yours, sir.
Excellent. All right. Well, welcome everybody. So we're talking British Columbia birding today. I'll just pull up a map of BC. You can see here now. British Columbia is massive. I was saying earlier, if you superimposed a map of, well, we call it BC. If you superimpose a map of BC on the Western US, the province gobbles up most of Washington, Oregon, and California combined. So it is a huge region. But of course, we're not going to be exploring the whole province. We're going to be down in the very southern, sort of southwestern corner of BC on our tours. We're running a winter tour and a summer tour to British Columbia. So some of the sites we visit, we will just go to on the summer trip, and some we will just go to on the winter trip. But if you see the map here, in the far southwest, you see Vancouver. That's the major city that we start our trip in, both summer and winter trips. And you see the river, the Fraser River comes down, and the estuary is right at Vancouver, which makes for a lot of excellent birding. Just offshore there, you see Vancouver Island, which in itself is huge. It's 400 some kilometers from top to bottom. So it's a massive piece of land as well. And we're going to spend on our winter tour a couple of days at the southern end around Victoria. Then both on the summer and the winter trips, we're going to head inland. If you can see these towns, Vernon, Kelowna, and Penticton, and Kamloops, that is the Okanagan Thompson region. So that's a whole other region with very different habitat, very different birds from what you find along the coast. And that region is in the rain shadow. So as the storms come in off the Pacific, they hit the mountain range, the Cascade mountain range, and drop all their rain. And by the time the clouds make it over to the Okanagan, there's no rain left. So we're very dry. We get less than 12 inches of rain per year, which is nearly desert conditions, not quite, but so it's a unique bit of habitat there. So I'm going to start off just by chatting a little bit here about Vancouver and the Fraser River Delta. So I just picked a few sites that are perhaps the most interesting that we're going to visit while we're in that area. So we've got this George C. Rifle Migratory Bird Sanctuary in Vancouver, and it's it is a private sanctuary, and it's fantastic for waterfowl, sandhill cranes, and all sorts of neat birds. There's often owls there. On the winter trip, we might luck out and get a saw-whet owl. So it's a very, an important part of our tour, this rifle bird sanctuary. Boundary Bay is an IBA, so that's an important bird area, and mainly for migrating and wintering birds. So we get just huge numbers of waterfowl and shorebirds come through and use the tidal mud flats at Boundary Bay. So we'll be sure to spend some time there. The Tawasin Ferry Jetty, so it's just a man-made jetty out into the strait that the ferries come and go from. But the rocky shoreline along there is quite good for attracting some interesting shorebirds and waterfowl out on the ocean there. Stanley Park finally is a famous forested park in Vancouver. I can show you another picture here. So this is Vancouver, which is truly a beautiful city. And the downtown core here is on a little bit of a peninsula, and just back sort of towards the top left, you'll see this big area of trees. That's Stanley Park, and it's full of good forest birds. So chestnut-backed chickadees and brown creepers and Townsend's warblers and all sorts of interesting things. Pileated woodpeckers will be in there. On the other side of the city, you've got these taller mountains. Those are what we call the North Shore Mountains. And at least on our summertime trip, we'll go up and poke around a bit in those mountains to look for things like red-breasted sapsuckers and city grouse, etc. So anyway, Vancouver, there it is. It's quite an attractive city. It's the third largest city in Canada, so it's a big, bustling metropolis of, I don't know, close to 3 million people or something. Now here, just to show you a little bit about it's the Fraser River Delta, which is apparently the largest estuary along the Pacific coast of North America. So it's quite an important region for birds, especially snow geese. These are lesser snow geese, and there's a flock of, estimated anyway, 135,000 lesser snow geese that travel between the Fraser Delta, which is in BC, and the Skagit River Delta, which is just across the border in Washington. So these birds are lucky. They don't need any passports to go from one country to the next. They can just fly back and forth, and that's what these snow geese do. So on the winter trip, we'll see these large flocks of snow geese. Anyway, summertime, they're all, this particular flock nests on Wrangel Island in Russia. So we probably won't see any on the summer trip, but on the winter trip, big flocks of snow geese and other waterfowl. This is a baby sandhill crane. Now they nest at the Rifle Refuge, so we have a good chance to see especially on the summertime trip anyway, to see the babies, or at least the adult sandhill cranes, walking around at quite close range. They're not shy at the Rifle Refuge. The black oyster catcher is one of the shorebirds we should encounter, especially at the Tawasin Ferry Jetty. They really like that spot. They nest there. They're around all year. So black oyster catcher should be seen in both our summer and our winter trips at the Tawasin Jetty. They're kind of comical looking. The field guides say they look like a bird smoking a big orange cigar, which I guess you could see. This is probably a female, I would think, because it's got a brown body. The males are very black. The females have a brown body and a black head. And here's another of our shorebirds that like the rocky shorelines of Tawasin and on Vancouver Island. This is a black turnstone. So we get flocks of black turnstones that come in and spend the winter and through migration along the rocky shorelines along the British Columbia coast. Now, gulls are not everybody's favorite thing. I know that, but I like gulls. Gulls are one of my favorite groups. And Vancouver is fantastic for glaucous winged gulls. It's the typical Vancouver gull that you see all over the place. So here's a glaucous winged gull. We've got a bit of a taxonomic issue in this part of the world, though, because Western gulls, which come up the West Coast into Washington State, they hybridize with glaucous winged gulls in Washington State. So we get a ton of hybrid glaucous winged Western gulls, which are known collectively as Olympic gulls. And well, this one here, because the wingtips are basically the same color as the back, it looks like a pure glaucous winged. But when you get the hybrids, the wingtips get a bit darker, and it's a real mess. So especially on, well, both trips, just expect to see tons of glaucous winged gulls. Now this would be a feature on the winter trip, golden crowned sparrows. We get a lot of them that come down and spend the winter in coastal British Columbia, and they're very attractive birds. So at the rifle, especially at the rifle refuge where they do have some feeders, we will see lots of golden crowned sparrows. I just saw somebody ask about rock sandpiper.
Yeah.
And yes, that's possible. It's not a guaranteed one. It's a bit harder to find, but I know, it is a possibility anyway.
Chris, better in winter or summer for rock sandpiper?
Oh, definitely winter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they're kind of I guess there would be more of an Arctic nester, and then they come down the West Coast to spend the winter. So for British Columbians, if you want to see a rock sandpiper, for sure, it's a bit of an adventure. You have to go to one certain area where they are guaranteed, and it's a long ways out of the way. So there's often one or two that are hanging around Victoria, though. So that's where we'll hope to snag a rock sandpiper. A few years ago, actually, we had a purple sandpiper, which was only the second ever record for the Pacific Coast, and that was in Victoria in the wintertime. This is Boundary Bay here, a picture of Boundary Bay. This would be high tide, I guess, because at low tide, there's just mud for miles. You can see in the background there, that's Mount Baker. So that's an old volcano in Washington State. So we're not far at all from Washington State when you're in Vancouver. Now on our winter trip anyway, this Boundary Bay will be just chock full of ducks. There could be just tens of thousands of pintails and widgeons, including Eurasian widgeons. Often there can be dozens or up to 100 Eurasian widgeon here in the winter. Big flocks of dunlin spend the winter here. 10-20,000 dunlin spend the winter in Boundary Bay. And then migration time, we get, I don't know what the number is, but a huge portion of the general population of Western sandpipers come through and use Boundary Bay. There'll probably still be a few poking around when we do our summer trip, although most will be have gone further north to nest. Also, Boundary Bay here is good for short-eared owls. If we visit in the sort of late afternoon on the winter trip, we should pick up short-eared owls and a variety of other raptors, peregrines. Occasionally, gyrfalcons are attracted to the masses of waterfowl here. And then, once in a while, we get snowy owls along this shoreline here. They have eruptions. It's when their food supply up in the Arctic crashes, they come south. So I don't know what the number is, but it might be every 10 years we have a big snowy owl winter, where I have been down to Boundary Bay and seen 20 of them along the beach at once. But other winters there might be one or two hanging around. But anyhow, it's a possibility that we might get some snowy owls on the winter trip.
Okay, Chris, I'm just going to stop for questions a little bit.
Sure.
Wow, so there was an exclamation, 20 snowy owls at once. Holy cow. Holy cow, indeed.
That was exceptional.
Yeah. Gyrfalcon, is that a winter and summer bird or just a winter bird?
Winter bird, yeah.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
And then we covered the rocks, this rock sandpiper bird. Oh, so other geese.
Right.
I have to say the joy of Bosque del Apache in New Mexico is finding Ross's geese fairly easy. Ross's geese, do they come to your neck and you got to sort them out amongst the 135 snows, or you don't even, how does that fall, man?
Ross's goose is very, very
It's like
rare.
a rare. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're not going to spend a lot of
rare.
time looking at that. Now, what about cackling goose, which,
right.
I mean, as a Colorado birder, they're like, I don't know. I think they're about 20 to 30% of our winter Canada geese flights, that annoying term, white cheek geese term, but you get the point. I mean, I assume you guys get cackling geese, or you don't?
We do. Yeah, lots of, quite a few, especially in the winter, and in migration, we'll get lots of cacklers in with the Canadas, and various races of them as well, and some of them are of the larger variety that cause a lot of identification problems. But just yesterday I was out for a little bit and saw one of the tiny little minima ones, and when you see one of those, there's no question they're just like barely bigger than a mallard. So that's a winter bird. Again, summertime they're further north nesting, so we should get them on the winter trip.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been surprised, because we do those Colorado grouse tours in April, and people are really asking, "Boy, I really want to see a cackling geese," and they're really kind of gone, certainly by late April, but people are missing them from their life list because quite frankly they're a tricky ID, and quite frankly I think that there should be a whole website on identifying Canada cackling geese in an easy way, but I don't know that. I've talked to Ted Floyd about that, but that was 15 years ago when they made the split. But God, they make it so hard to tell, and people have all these little rules. I don't know that any of them are very reliable. Besides a lot of Canada cackling geese study, which it's not much fun to do when you see 300 birds and trying to, I mean, who really wants to look through 300 bird species? That's exhausting. Now, what about greater white front-ended goose? Does that show up at times? It must, right?
Yeah, we get them again. They're fairly common as a migrant, and wintertime I'm sure there'll be a few kicking around.
Sure.
Especially down along the coast, even up in the interior here. In the wintertime, we do have still big numbers of geese, and there's often singles or a couple of white fronts, couple snow geese, couple cacklings around. So I think we should pick them up. Now, Brant is another goose that we we should pick up Brant on the winter trip, and perhaps there's maybe the odd one that summers at Tawasin at the jetty there. So we might get them on both summer and winter trips.
So wow. So I mean, it's actually a pretty goose heavy trip, which we didn't even really touch upon.
Yeah.
But some nice birds here. Oh
boy, here we go.
I love the person asking this question, because she is a quality ticker. That's all I have to say.
Boreal Owl in the winter, huh?
Yeah. So your Boreal Owls, you're better in the summer, right?
They're year round here. They're just easier. They're a little easier to get in the sort of late spring, early summer when they're more vocal. So there's a chance on both trips. It's a bird I just can't guarantee, but what we'll do is go to the right spot where they are and at the right time of year, and we'll give it a shot. And some years I have really good success, other years I don't. It's just kind of the way it is, but it's a bird we're going to try for, and I'm hoping we can produce.
Right. And the sites are just more accessible in the summertime because there's less snow around Kelowna, your backyard.
Right.
And they are, I'm not calling it your backyard, but I'll call 4 hours from Kelowna your backyard.
Right.
That's going to cover just, there's a lot of snow in Kelowna in the wintertime. We do okay accessing up there, but better, just more accessible for the sites in the summertime.
Yeah,
that's like about right.
We have this is a very popular part of the world for skiing, so we have a lot of the roads up into the high country are actually maintained fairly well through the winter because skiers and other winter activities. So there are a few spots that we can get up into that high boreal forest in the wintertime without too much trouble.
Yeah, and truly the next question I know will be a pleasurable one. Bohemian Wax Wings, because we've had that conversation. They're
Right.
they're pretty gettable, correct?
Oh yeah. Now the winter only, however. So summertime
Okay.
they nest up quite far north. But wintertime, and again, their numbers are a little bit variable, but basically every winter in the interior of British Columbia anyway, there are Bohemian waxwings, and some years they're here by the thousands. I'll see. I recall one day in March when I guess they were starting to head north, but I had estimated 10,000 Bohemians in a day around here. So, typically you might see flocks here and there of 100, 200, and then some of the big flocks might be 1,000 or more. We have a lot of berry, a lot of they like to hang out in the suburban neighborhoods where there's all these ornamental plantings with berries and things. So it's just kind of a case of driving around in certain neighborhoods where they tend to be and looking for these great big flocks of waxwings. But yeah, very highly probable on the winter trip for sure.
Yeah. I mean, interesting. We've had this nice little contrast between summer and winter throughout the thing. And I have to say, I would come to BC and I'll be there in both seasons sometime in the next decade, Chris. Hopefully I'm still alive and you're still alive, man.
Come on up.
Then there you go. Hey, everybody's been super polite. We've got 37 people on the call. So, you guys can unmute when we take these little breaks after a geographical area. So Chris has obviously covered the Vancouver area pretty well. And then for an American, just the ever confusing geography of Victoria and Southern Vancouver Island.
Right.
Chit chat next. So we're going to move on to that, but we'll take another little break after this little geographic segue here. Go, my friend Chris Charlesworth. I will zip my lips for a while.
All right. Now this particular bit, Victoria and Southern Vancouver Island. Now that refers to the winter trip. We don't do this on the summer trip. So on the winter trip, after we've done some birding around Vancouver, we catch a ferry over to the island and cross what used to be called, and a lot of people still call it, the Strait of Georgia. But there's been a real movement to change a lot of our names back to some more indigenous location names. So now we're referring to the Strait of Georgia as the Salish Sea, which is the Salish were the tribe that hangs out that used to, or still does, I guess, live along the coast in southern BC. So we take a ferry crossing across the Salish Sea on a great big vessel that carries hundreds of people and hundreds of cars, and actually provides pretty good birding. It's very stable. You can stand outside, weather permitting, but even if it's rainy and ugly, I'll still be out there looking. And there's a nice variety of things, birds, and even with a little bit of luck, some cetaceans like orcas, killer whales, or humpbacks and dolphins and things like that we can see. And aside from that, the scenery is really nice along the ferry ride as well. We go out of Vancouver, cross some open water, and then we kind of weave our way through the Gulf Islands. And it's a nice trip. Takes about 2 hours.
And what kind of birds do you usually see on there, Chris, that you don't see directly right on the shore?
Yeah, so you get stuff like alcids, common murres, maybe rhinoceros auklets, marbled merlets. If you're lucky, ancient merlets, pigeon guillemots, Pacific loons, a variety of gulls. So yeah, it's a good, you don't get a lot of the real open ocean birds, so we're not getting shearwaters and petrels and stuff because it's sheltered waters, but some of the birds that don't mind the sheltered inland sections, are seen quite well from the ferry.
Right. And then we haven't had the cormorant chat. I guess this is a good spot.
Yeah,
but yeah. But you get the one with the purple throat. It's Brandt's cormorant.
Brandt's cormorant. Yeah, we should get 3 on the crossing. I mean, double crested is common, pelagic is common, and Brandt's is more common once you get to Vancouver Island. So it's quite it's quite uncommon, the Brandt's around Vancouver, but once you get over to the island, usually Brandt's are quite numerous.
Yeah, and in Vancouver City is what you're trying to say.
Yeah,
Because it does confuse the heck out of we people who live south of you.
right.
You know, Vancouver Island versus Vancouver. We just assume Vancouver City is on Vancouver Island, but that's not the case, right?
No, Vancouver,
Right.
the city is on the mainland, and Vancouver Island, of course. The main city there is Victoria. That's the capital of British Columbia as well. So I know it's a bit confusing, but
It is. But hey, I can't wait till we get more name changes and then it'll be clear.
that's right. Yeah, of course,
That'll be an opportunity.
Vancouver Island was named after I think it was Captain George Vancouver who explored the area.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be terribly surprised if there's a movement sometime to change some of these names as well. But
that'll be great. It'll make it easier for us to understand the geography. Okay,
yeah.
I'll shut up and you go on.
Right. So once we get across to Victoria, some of the spots we'll check over there include the Saanich agricultural fields. And the main reason that we like to go there is because it's got a population of Eurasian skylarks that they've been introduced long ago, and they're still there. And I believe it's probably just the easiest spot in North America to get a skylark if that's one you want. I think I'm not sure if they're still there on the San Juan Islands in Washington State, but I know that was another spot you used to be able to get them. But anyway, we'll put in some time looking for Eurasian skylarks in Saanich. It's also a great place just for other open country birds. So a lot of geese. In fact, a couple of years ago, there was a pair of pink-footed geese found there, and with all the Canadas and other things. Red-throated pipit, which is another sort of Asian bird, is often found at Saanich. Also, a number of these rocky headlands can be found around Victoria. So one such is Clover Point. That's one of my favorites, and it's another good spot to see things like oyster catchers and black turnstones and surf birds and various gulls and seabirds. And finally, in Victoria, there's Beacon Hill Park, which is a nice wooded city park, good for things like bush tits and Anna's hummingbirds and Buick's wrens and all sorts of things like that. So here's a shot of one of the ferries. You can see it's a big boat, yeah, basically you just drive on there. There's just hundreds of cars on the lower decks, and you go up to the upper decks. The boats have everything you need on there, from full restaurants and comfy chairs and stuff. But I find the birders are usually outside braving the elements on the outer decks looking for some special birds. And there are just tons of trips per day. They go back and forth regularly between Vancouver and Victoria. So that's an example of one of the boats we'll be on.
Nice.
And Victoria is really beautiful. It's the capital, like I said, of British Columbia. So you can see over to the left there, the building with the green top. That's the Provincial Legislature building. And it's got a lot of British charm. Victoria was named after Queen Victoria, and it sort of upholds its British charm even to this day, with the architecture and just the general feel of the place. And a lot of birders. Victoria is a very popular place for birders to go, just because of its position at the south end of the island. You get a lot of excellent things showing up there. And here's one of the cormorants that we were chatting about earlier. This is a Brandt's cormorant, but I think it's a young bird, so it doesn't show any of the color on the face. But that's probably of the three, it's the trickiest cormorant to get up here. This is a pretty one, Harlequin Ducks. So we get lots of them in British Columbia, and they spend the winter on the ocean and then head up into the mountains to nest along streams. So it's a bird we should get both on the summer and the winter trip. Summertime, though, they're often not in this beautiful plumage. The ducks go into eclipse, so it might not look quite so stunning, the males, but we should see them on both trips. And another one of my favorite ducks from this part of the world, Barrows Goldeneye here. So we probably get Barrows on both summer and winter, as well as common Goldeneye on the winter trip anyway. Gulls, here we go, another one of your favorite groups. This one is a short-billed gull, and you might be thinking, well, what the heck is that? I've never heard of that one, and that's because it used to be called the Mew gull before a recent split. So Mew gull was split into common gull in Europe and Asia, and now what we're calling short-billed gull in North America. So Vancouver Island and around Vancouver, there'll be lots of Mew or short-billed gulls to look for. They do have quite a short bill. Basically, they have that little yellow bill with no marks on it, which is quite a good identifying feature. We're hoping for these surf birds in Victoria on the winter trip, especially at Clover Point and some of these rocky headlands. So they come down from their Arctic breeding grounds in winter along the rocky shorelines around Victoria, and they're always on sort of the top of the list that people want to see. And in addition to all these nice coastal birds, we've got a lot of forest on the island and around Vancouver, and it's temperate rainforest, so it's a lot of sort of wet cedar forest covered in moss, and typically, some of it anyway, we'll visit some areas with some really big old trees that will be hundreds of years old, and you see a lot of ferns on the ground as well, and that forest is full of interesting species as well. So let's pull up a few here. We already talked about this earlier, but varied thrush is always one of the more popular birds. So that's quite a common resident of the forests on the island. Beautiful bird too. And another one, the Pacific wren. So tiny, kind of inconspicuous little wren that lives in those wet coastal forests. Used to be called the winter wren again before a split. I don't know how many, 10, 15 years ago, it was split into winter and Pacific wren. They're very common. That's a very common species along the west coast in those cedar forests. And on our summer trip anyway, western tanagers will be quite common, I guess, throughout the trip in the forests. This is a nice male. We're tanager deficient in the West. It's the only one we get over here, unfortunately, but it's a nice one. So you can expect to see lots of western tanagers on the summer trip. And this fine specimen is a red-breasted sap sucker. So BC, it's a big place. We get 4 different sap suckers. Red-breasted is kind of the coastal variety. When you come inland towards where I live, we get red-naped, as well as some Williamson sapsuckers. So, summer trip, we should get those 3. Wintertime, the only one that hangs around is the red-breasted. The other ones go south. And the 4th sapsucker we have in BC, we're not going to get, probably because it's in the far northeast of the province, the yellow-bellied sapsucker. But so 3 out of 4. That's not too bad. So anyone have questions on that Victoria bit?
That was great. I'm going to put this out there because I truly think it's the most fascinating part of BC birding. And we talked about this pre-conference, and Chris just knows I'm so excited about Asian and Eurasian and European birds showing up in BC. But basically starting in about November, good stuff starts to pop up, right?
Yeah, even October. I mean, even September or even July. It depends. Like shorebird.
Yeah. But the bulk of that shorebird stuff is both on, there's a lot of birders in Vancouver City, and there's a ton of birders on Victoria and southern Vancouver Island. That a lot of these birds get found. Like every year, there's or
There's
mostly
something.
nearly every year there's something, one or two
There's
really
something.
mega birds. I mean,
Yeah.
I think a really fun thing about Texas bird watching is there's always one or two mega birds down there. And it strikes me that BC winter birding is much the same way. There's just a good chance for one or two birds you're not going to see anywhere else in the ABA area very often.
Yeah.
And so just pre-tour, we were talking, let me see if I got him. There was a couple of European thrushes, which he has a Latin name for, but
Euro turds.
That's right, the Euro turds. The red wing, dusky thrush, and what am I missing, man?
Fieldfare.
And fieldfare. I mean, all three of those birds I've never seen in the ABA area. All three of those birds I've never seen, period. I would love to see those birds in the ABA area. And then a couple other nice birds, and say we listed 5 or 6, I think, on the website. Other nice birds coming up, say in the last decade that you can remember.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
yellow-browed warbler, citrine wagtail, red-flanked bluetail. Some winters we might have multiple bramblings, redback shrike, brown shrike. Common cuckoo. There's quite a lot. BC has a long list of Asian vagrants, and when they show up in the winter, they tend to stick around. They can often stick around for months.
Yeah, so I mean, I just think another really attractive feature of winter BC birding, and not that you're going to get 10 of those birds, you might get 1 or 2, but I just think those are just really awesome birds to have on your ABA list, because you're not going to get them anywhere else. I think for an ABA lister, I think BC is in the inner time kind of has the same, I use the word sexiness, but that's probably not the right term, but appealing feature of just really mega rarities reliably showing up every year. So I think that's, and every sort of an exaggeration, but I would say most years there's some really nice rarity down there. And we do more of the Vancouver Island in the wintertime, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So that's we do more time there and less time in
the reason being
in the areas because of snow and weather and birds.
The reason being, just in the summertime, the birding is very similar between the mainland and Vancouver Island. Whereas I think in the winter there's just different options to get on the island that it would be a shame not to go there.
Exactly.
Somebody's asking me if we would break from the trip for a rare bird. Now I think we would, as long as it was within reason, if it's not halfway across the province, or as long as we don't have to severely alter our itinerary. But I think if there was something good around, we would definitely try and put in a little bit of effort to see it. That's the plan anyway.
Right. And truly the winter trip is really designed to hang out in Vancouver City area and Victoria Island for sufficient days that if something good pops up, we ought to be reasonably close that we would get it. We wouldn't probably have to break from the trip much. It would be sort of part of the plan. That's kind of why we have that winter trip designed the way we have it.
Right.
And Chris and I, we actually design trips really differently. Chris tends for longer trips. I tend for short order trips. I'm a total economist when I plan anything. I'm a very dollar per bird kind of guy, though everybody hates that term. But I mean, guides are always like, hey, let's do it as long as possible. But together, I think we've designed 2 really good BC trips. So I think they're both really appealing. And we haven't even touched on the Boreal Forest yet, which I think is but we'll get there. And so we've got this other question. Are Southwest BC and Vancouver Island relatively snow-free in winter? What a great question.
Yeah. And they are.
That's a great question.
It doesn't mean they always are, but most often they're snow-free. Down in the lowlands, of course, we have lots of mountains on both the island and Vancouver. So as soon as you climb into the mountains, you might be in just tons of snow. But down in the cities and along the coastline, it's generally snow-free and quite, relatively mild.
Right. And did you
Somebody
get
else asked me
did you
what-
see the crop question? Go for it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know exactly what they're growing in Saanich, but I know we're always birding the bulb fields, which I feel like might be kind of onions and things like that. There's just a lot of I don't know, vegetables and stuff grown there. Now, Vancouver anyway has lots of crops of blueberries. Blueberries and cranberries are a big crop in Vancouver. That's sort of a couple of the main crops there. And up here in the Okanagan where I live, tons of fruit. It's surprisingly to people, it's a wine region. So we have a bustling wine region in Canada here in the Okanagan Valley. So we're covered in vineyards. Just checking out any other questions here. I think we got them all now.
Yeah.
From
fun chat so far. People, thank you so much for the input. The questions have been great. We'll move on to, this next one is really nice.
Right.
EC, yeah, go, my friend.
So now we are getting into a little bit of Boreal Forest chat here. So summer trip, winter trip, this is pretty inaccessible country. You could drive through on the highway, but winter trip, you wouldn't be able to get to most of the areas. So this is Manning Park is a feature of the summer trip. And here's a picture of Manning Park. It's beautiful. It's mountains, it's forests, subalpine meadows. It's one of the largest provincial parks. I think it's something like 206,000 acres. So it's a very large area with trails and roads that get you into the proper habitat. So if you like flowers in addition to birds, if you like to see some interesting mammals, you're going to really like this part of the trip. I added this one, Steller's jay. It's fairly common across Western North America, but it's the official provincial bird of British Columbia, the Steller's jay. So Manning Park and lots of spots throughout the winter and summer trips, we'll be seeing Steller's jays. This one is the Canada jay. So it was previously known as the gray jay, as you might know. And it's a bird of the Boreal Forest, so we should see them in Manning Park. We did a sort of a referendum in Canada to pick our national bird, and believe it or not, this Canada jay came out on top. So it hasn't been made official by the government or anything yet, but our unofficial national bird is the Canada jay. So I'm just glad it wasn't the Canada goose, personally. Now we're talking about the 4 chickadees. This is the toughest of all, the Boreal chickadees. So Manning Park, we have a good chance of finding them. On the summer and winter trips, we have sort of, a few different chances to get up into the high Boreal Forest. I see someone that had figured out what the crops were there at Saanich. That's good. The bulbs were tulips, apparently. Anyway, yeah, Boreal chickadee is one of the 4, and probably the one that people typically want to see the most. And we have pretty good success rate of finding them. Of course, woodpeckers. Everyone wants woodpeckers, and a couple of the tough ones, American three-toed and black-backed, are possible in Manning Park. So this is a three-toed here. Woodpeckers in general like forest fires because the fires come through, kill or semi-kill the trees, and then insects and beetles and things infest the bark. And so British Columbia is no stranger to forest fires. We annually in sort of July, August, September, we have pretty massive forest fires in recent years. So there's a lot of good woodpecker habitat out there. And the last few years anyway, three-toads and blackbacks have been not too difficult to find. So I know that's a bird that people often like to see, and Manning Park's a good spot for them. Ooh. Did I make a little red drawing on the map on my picture there? Can you see that or no? Evening grosbeak.
Yeah, so, I can see the red drawing, Chris.
I probably did that. I don't know how, but anyway. Evening grosbeaks are one of the finches anyway. So we get various finches, especially in the winter, and they're eruptive, so they're around in numbers sometimes, and other years they're harder to find. But evening grosbeak is one we have a good chance on both winter and summer trips. And pine grosbeaks, another well, we consider it a boreal forest bird here. So wintertime they can be down in the lowlands. Summertime, if we're going to get them, they'll be higher up in the boreal forest. So Manning Park's a good spot to look for pine grosbeaks. Townsend's warbler. So we don't get anywhere near the variety of the warblers here in the west that you get back east, but Townsend's is one of the nicer ones anyway. And they're a bird of the higher forest, so Manning Park's fairly full of Townsend's warblers in the summertime. Another one of the target birds or highlight birds of Manning Park is the sooty grouse. So they're quite common in Manning Park, and we'll put in some effort to try and get this one. Basically, you just drive up one or two roads that are really good for them and keep your eyes open on the edge of the road for the sooty grouse sitting there. And they're quite vocal at the time of year we'll be there too. So you can hear them hooting, and that's another easier way to track them down. They used to be lumped as the blue grouse. You might remember that. So nowadays, Manning Park is kind of the height of land of the Cascade mountain range. So it acts as a natural barrier for some of these birds. So sooty grouse is the more coastal form. So from Vancouver up to Manning Park, generally you get sooty grouse on the western slope of the mountains. And then as we go down the eastern slope of the mountains into the Okanagan Valley, then we're into dusky grouse, which is the other half of the blue grouse split. So pretty good chance on the summer trip we might get both sooty and dusky. And just to add in a few other things, both of our tours, summer and winter, you're going to see some interesting mammals. This will be a feature of the summer trip. It's a Cascade golden mantled ground squirrel, which, if you look at its range map, it's got a fairly restricted range in the Cascades. So we should see this one up in Manning Park. They're very curious, and they're coming up and almost climbing up your leg to check you out. And Manning Park is really good for black bears. So good chance we might see a black bear there. Of course, black bears aren't just black, are they? So this one is kind of, I don't know, cinnamon, you might say. But in BC, we get it ranging all the way from pitch black to cinnamon and blonde. And then on the coast, further north than where we're going to be, there's a variety called the spirit bear, which is white. There's a white black bear. And occasionally, like this individual here, they can look somewhat like a grizzly if you don't know what you're looking for. So you've got to know to look for the sort of round face and the big hump on the back. But this is indeed a black bear. So that's wow. Manning Park for you.
Wow. Chris, you are covering a lot here, and I think we're going to go an extra 10 minutes here, folks, but I still want to keep the questions coming. I have a ton. Anybody got any questions out there? If not, I'll jump into mine. I'm going to click on the chat box here, which is being a good boy. I'll probably hit this next question when we get to there, but let's talk about some of these boreal species. You did well covering sooty and blue grouse. A little more difficult species to get is spruce grouse, but you do see it. It's just it's kind of a Manning Park bird, right? But it's just tough.
It's one I don't usually get in Manning Park. I guess they're probably there, but I do get it up in the Okanagan when we go up into
okay. So we'll talk more about that on the next spot.
Yeah. And rough grouse as well.
Yeah, right. And truly, as climate change happens, and not that BC or Canada's immune to climate change, but we are thinking points north may lead us to some more easier boreal birding than, say, the classic USA spots of Minnesota. So it's kind of intriguing that Chris kind of has better. Chris and I talked extensively about the sort of better finding for a couple of these boreal birds, like Boreal Chickadees. He doesn't like to use the word trash birds. He does use the word trash birds. Some PE people hesitate at that, but you find Boreal Chickadees pretty reliably, correct?
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't call it a trash bird, but
okay.
But you got to put in a bit of effort, and I'd say if I go looking for them, the majority of the time I find them.
Yeah, right. And on a trip when you're up there in proper habitat for 3 or 4 days, you're going to find them.
You should run into. You're not going to see a lot, but generally, what I do is you have to attract in some other chickadees, so I do various things like pygmy owl calls and pishing and whatever, and
they come in.
The mountains generally, mountain chickadees come in, red-breasted nuthatches come in, make a lot of noise, and then that might bring in a couple of boreal chickadees. Is kind of
I gotcha.
Kind of how it normally works, anyway.
Right, and then American three-toed and blackback woodpecker always take a lot of work, but you typically get in them.
Well, it's been a little bit easier in recent years because of forest fires.
Yeah.
So if you can get into a burn, that's about a year old, it can be like infested with not only three-toed and blackback, but also hairies and downies and pileateds and a lot of the other woodpeckers as well.
Right. As infestation goes, I like when the word woodpecker is the next word. So the other thing you mentioned is forest fires, and that's, I mean, truly, my in-laws' family cabin was burned to the ground. The area around it, that some bulldozer guy, thank God, saved their cabin. But I obviously live in Colorado. We get forest fires every year. It's sort of like a new feature of living in the American West.
Yeah.
But truly, I find what people don't I get questions about the Brazilian Amazon forest fires as well. But what people don't realize is these are vast areas. Again, BC covers the same geographic area of California, Washington, and Oregon State combined. And, so if there's forest fires in BC, we just need them to be, 20 to 60 minutes drive off our route, and then they help our bird watching. But in terms of forest fires actually impacting the trip, that's a pretty rare thing.
Yeah. I mean, if you ran trips sort of in late July and August, it might become a problem. But sort of May, June, typically it's not it's not a big thing yet. Yeah,
and truly, I mean, I don't like the smell of forest fires at all, but generally the odds of them getting in the way of a tour are pretty thin. And that being said, we, last year at Big Bend National Park, the one trail up to get the Kalima warbler was burned over like 2 days before we got there. Yeah. And we could hear them, but we couldn't find them. But, so, I mean, it can impact bird watching trips, but it's a pretty rare thing. Just so people know, don't freak out about forest fires or anything.
Talking about climate change, this year we had the hottest temperature ever on record in southern British Columbia. It was the hottest temperature ever recorded in Canada. It was 49.6 degrees Celsius.
Which means nothing to us. But I think we looked that up. It's about 110 degrees, 112 degrees Fahrenheit, right?
Maybe even more than that, actually.
Anyway, it's pretty darn hot.
So it was recorded in this little town called Lytton. Lytton is generally it's the hottest temperature in the country anyway. But so they got 49 degrees one day. The next day the town burnt down. So anyway, we're not immune to climate change up here either. But
yeah.
It was just a bad year.
And then some more excellent questions. I'm going to plug your dad a little bit. So this question involves winter trips, and do you see the Northern Lights?
Well, you could, I guess, but certainly would be tricky. It's not something that I think is very easily predicted. we had a big showing of them, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. I didn't even see them because it came out on the news the next day that last night had brilliant northern lights. So, you can get lucky, and we will be doing some owling in the evenings. And if it's clear, there's a chance anyway to see them. I've seen them several times, quite a few times in my life when I'm out owling in this part of the world. But it's something you can't plan on anyway.
Yeah. And then I'm going to plug your dad. So what's your pop's name? I always forget. I know his last name is Charlesworth.
Right. Yeah. My dad's Rod Charlesworth.
Yeah. So Rod Charlesworth is Chris's father, and he's truly one of the most popular artists in Canada. And he has some just Google it one of these days, Rod Charlesworth. And he has some just fantastic paintings that capture the northern lights. And it's sort of interesting. I think it's really fascinating artwork. So one of these days, Google Rod Charlesworth, and you'll get some nice paintings of the northern lights and other stuff too. It's cool stuff. Yeah. And anyway, that plug is over. The next question: what are the months for the winter and summer trips?
The months? Okay.
Yeah, sure. Shoot, go.
So the winter trip, we are talking February, I believe.
Yeah.
Which is a good time. I thought because, a lot of the real good birds that are found in British Columbia, some of these Asian things are found on Christmas bird counts, which are December, early January. So I figured it would be best to have them after that anyway. So if any of these unusual things show up on the count, then we'll have them hopefully hang out for us and set.
And we even think like February, Marchish, we're okay for winter trips.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, March is still good.
And then summer months was what, June, July?
Yeah, June. I think it'd be June, early July. June. Yeah, just it's the peak. It's the peak time for the most species, and bird song's still going strong until sort of the by mid-July, bird song is dropped off here, so you don't catch as much. But June and early July anyway are very good. So that's why we planned them for that time.
Alrighty, great question. With no other questions, I think we'll jump to gosh, I've got this block, the Thompson in the Okanagan Valley.
Right.
Chris's backyard there in Kelowna.
It's my backyard. So this is that area of rain shadow I was talking about. It's much drier than on the coast. It's typically quite hot in the summertime. Wintertime, it's colder up here than it is on the coast. That's one thing, although it's not as cold as you might expect for Canada. So temperatures, now I work in Celsius. We're metric here in Canada. So typical day in the Thompson Okanagan in February, March might be anywhere from sort of 2 or 3 degrees Celsius, maybe 5 degrees down to say minus 8 or 10. And occasionally we get a cold snap. So there can be cold snaps, usually short-lived anyway, that last a few days down to minus 20. So just to put that in Fahrenheit so we don't freak people out. Right.
2 and 3 Celsius is above freezing, like in the mid 30s.
Yeah.
And the typical day does get cold below freezing at night, and then occasionally a cold snap makes it pretty darn cold.
Yeah. It's a dry climate up here in the Okanagan anyway. So it's usually we don't have a lot of humidity, so it's fairly dry. Being down in a valley, we can get cloud kind of settles into the valley, so gray days are not uncommon. But if you get up a little higher into the mountains, you'll be above the clouds, and it's beautiful and blue. So just a few of the spots that we hit in the Okanagan Valley. A Soyuz Lake. So this lake straddles the U.S. border. So half of it is in Washington State, half of it is in British Columbia, and just the area is very good for. The Okanagan in general is good for 8 or 10 species that you can't find anywhere else in Canada. And the sort of Soyuz Lake, Vaso Lake, and White Lake areas are the main spots to go and look for these birds. Some of them are, canyon wrens, Lewis's woodpecker, flamulated owls, sage thrashers. So maybe birds that are fairly common in the Western US, but as far as Canada goes, this is the only spot you can find them. Vaso Lake, for me anyway, the main attractions there are these towering cliffs that you get things like canyon wrens, chukars, which are introduced, and golden eagles and things like that. White Lake is an area of sagebrush, so it's quite good for a variety of sparrows and sage thrasher and raptors and things. And then up where I live here, Kelowna, that's the biggest city in the area. There's an international airport on the winter trip. We fly in from Vancouver to Kelowna, and you fly at the end of the tour. You fly out of Kelowna. And Kamloops is another city. Kelowna and Kamloops are both First Nations words anyway. Kelowna, I believe, means grizzly bear in the First Nations language, but we have no grizzly bears here, probably for 200, 300 years now. And Kamloops means sort of meeting place, meeting of the rivers. So a couple of rivers come together there. One of our Okanagan specialty birds here, the Lewis's woodpecker. Beautiful bird, summertime bird. So expected on the summer trip anyway. And we're talking woodpeckers. So the last couple of years have been really good for black-backed woodpeckers with all the forest fires that we have had. So we have a good chance of tracking down black-backed woodpecker. It's also the only spot in Canada you can find western bluebirds, both summer and winter. So summertime, they're quite easy. Wintertime, they're hanging out in some of the vineyards and areas with berry trees and stuff. This is a picture of the Okanagan Valley. So you can see the extensive vineyards in the foreground, lots of vineyards, lots of these towering kind of cliffs in the back where there'll be canyon wrens and white-throated swifts and golden eagles. And the valley bottom is covered in various lakes. There's lots of lakes all the way through. So it's excellent birding. It's as far as Canada goes, it's kind of well known as one of the top 2 or 3 regions for birding. It's the canyon wren. Got a great song if you've ever heard canyon wren sing.
Oh,
it's
nice.
It's one of my favorite songs. Sage thrasher, probably for Canadian birders, this is like the one that they really want is to see the sage thrasher. And at White Lake, there's typically 2 or 3 pairs, and that's like it in the country. So, but we usually, recent years anyway, we've had really good luck finding them. Yellow-breasted chat is another sort of specialty bird up here. Uncommon, but should get them on the summer trip anyway. A lot of those areas around Vaso Lake anyway are excellent for California bighorn sheep. So we should see herds of bighorns roaming around there. This is just a picture of the north end of a Soyuz Lake on a typical winter day. So you can see that the valley bottom is pretty snow-free, but once you get up into the mountains, there's definitely snow. And be a nice variety of waterfowl on these lakes in the winter: grebes, loons, ducks of various types. Occasionally something unusual like a yellow-billed loon. There's a redneck grebe. Common loons, we'll see them on both trips, but they're only going to look this beautiful on the summer trip anyway. Wintertime, they don't look quite so stunning. It's really one of the best sounds too of this area. If you get up into the mountains in the summertime, just to hear the loons calling on the lakes is quite something. And of course, this part of the Okanagan Valley, that's where we're going to get all the Bohemian Wax Wings. On the winter trip. On the summer trip, you're going to get lots of cedar wax wings, but no Bohemians. Occasionally in the winter, some cedars do hang out. So we scan through the Bohemian flocks and look for the couple of cedar wax wings mixed in. A little bit about the Kamloops area. So it's more grassland up there, and it's quite beautiful. So lots of grasslands, little lakes and ponds, and birds like this Swainson's hawk and its unfortunate prey, the Sora, underneath it there. Also, the grasslands around Kamloops are fantastic for mountain bluebirds. And both western and eastern kingbirds. And then let's just talk a little bit about owls. Both winter and summer trips, we're going to be making an effort to get as many owls as we can on the tours. So pretty good chance, I think, on both trips for pygmy owls. This is a good part of the world for pygmy owls. We get a lot of them here. Of course, they're diurnal. They're a daytime owl, so that's one we can look for in the daytime. Summer trip, anyway, we've got a really good chance at the Flamulated Owl, which I know is a kind of a sought-after bird for a lot of people. And this one, I had suspected there was a nest in this hole, but I didn't see it until this Sap Sucker, which you can see on the left. It's a red-naped. He landed on the tree trunk, and then the little owl just poked his head right out to see who was knocking at the door. BC is the only area of Canada where you can get western screech owls, and around Kelowna I got quite a few sites where they like to roost, so pretty good chance for screech owls on both winter and summer trips. And this little cutie is a northern saw-whet owl, which we could get again on both trips. And one that we really want to get for you, great gray owl. Could be a bit of an eruptive bird, so some winters there might be a lot more than others, but typically there are some around, so we have a pretty good shot to find great gray on the winter trip, and we will make an effort to get them as well on the summer trip. It's kind of the reason that I included the Kamloops area. That's good to look for them anyway. And snowies, certainly not guaranteed, but possible anyway. If there's one or two along our route, we'll try and track them down. And the one that everybody wants, the Boreal Owl. Tricky, but we're going to get into the right spot at the right time of year, and we're going to give it a try. And we'll hopefully get them. And just one other bird, the poor will. It's another bird we should get on the summer trip. Another nocturnal bird that likes to hang out on the dirt roads. You can often walk up quite close to them and get a really good look like this one. And then at the end here, I just checked in a little variety of some of these Asian type vagrants that we might get super lucky and see on especially the winter trip. So this is a shot of the field fair we had a few winters ago. It was found on a Christmas bird count. The guy that found it identified it as an immature robin, but he brought the photos into the count tally up, and people were just like, "Whoa, that's not a robin." So it stuck around for months, and lots of people got to see that one. This is a bad shot of our red wing. So a red wing showed up in Victoria 6 or 7 winters ago, and then it returned for about 5 years in a row, and was seen basically almost every winter for several years. We assume it was the same bird, maybe not, but just because it was in the same area, it was an assumption. And here's a shot of our immature red-backed shrike. Curlew sandpiper is kind of one of the more regular Asian vagrants that we see now and then, and same with tufted duck. There's often one or two hanging around the coastal areas in the wintertime if we're lucky. And that's pretty much it. That comes to the end of my slide presentation. So
wow. So we're gonna take about 5 more minutes here. Chris, God, you just did a great job. Thanks, man. Truly, there's some guides I just connect with on these video conference. Chris Charlesworth is just a guy that, by the way, he's our new sort of North American USA Canada operations director, and he's just been a pleasure to work with. I gotta tell you that. But he is local to Kelowna, which only took me about 2-3 months to learn to pronounce correctly. I did okay, right?
You're doing it well now. Yeah, you think.
Yeah, I always put a W in there, but it's Kelowna.
Kelowna. That's right.
Silent W. And but I mean, clearly a lot of these birds in the Kelowna area, he's looking for all the time. Truly, sometimes when I call Chris in the afternoon, he's watching gulls somewhere, but I'm pretty darn sure you bird like every day, right? Yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of these birds in the Kelowna area, the greater Kelowna area, he's pretty much on top of all the time.
Yeah.
And we didn't talk much about ruffed grouse and spruce grouse, but except for briefly in passing, but both of those are really available on the winter trip. Ruffed grouse,
both trips.
Yeah. Okay. So both trips. So ruffed grouse, you feel is, nobody wants to use the word slam dunk, but it's pretty reasonable, right?
Yeah, that's probably typically it's the easiest grouse to get,
right,
in this part of the world,
right?
Yeah.
And truly a bird I need on my life list, and I just spent 12 days in Minnesota, North Dakota without seeing one.
Oh, right.
Which is just never fair, man.
That's not fair.
And then spruce grouse is always tough, but you find it on what, 30-50% of all trips? Kind of where you fallen on that?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to look for them specifically in the right spots, maybe 40-50%. Yeah, it takes a bit of luck.
Yeah. But. And on the summer trip, I think we have a couple back loops to try for it towards the end. So
yeah,
probably more likely on the summer design trip, but I think reasonable on both.
Reasonable on both, yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, I've covered that. Oh, and I just wanted to say, the power of local guides. I mean, we try to get local guides doing tours everywhere. In USA, Canada, it's always a little weird because we have, like, Chris is going to be an Alaska guide here soon. But it's like part of the greater Pacific Northwest area. So what the hell? But BC is his backyard. So he and the guides we use up there are pretty darn local. And it's going to be a huge advantage doing those tours. Whoa. Oh, somebody was asking for a bird frequency list for summer and winter.
Mm-hmm.
Leo, put that on your list to harass Chris about. Chris put that on your list to provide.
Okay, I'll do that.
So one of our delinquencies on these video conferences is we often get questions about frequency lists, and we need to catch up with that project. But we will get that out. And there you go. And that's just a kind word here about the photo quality. And all these photos are yours, right, man?
Well, there's one or two that I got from my friend Melissa.
Yes. Yeah. We'll plug Melissa a little bit too.
She provided me a couple of shots there.
Yeah. Gosh, I got nothing more. Any other questions for the crowd? And then we'll just, and then I think we can cut this off. The administrative stuff is just, I don't think we've got any issues there today. Any other questions for the crowd? Hearing none. I think we'll say, as they say in Hawaii, aloha. Oh, wait. There's a couple more text here. And there we go. We will send the list to everyone. And Leo, if you want to chop off the video conference, you can. I think we've done a great job. And everybody check out our website, www.pibird.com. All our dates are listed. Truly, Chris has a couple breaks in there where he's got a British group taking him to